Love, joy, hope, and peace. 4 words we associate with Christmas. Maybe at Christmas time you see them in the shops. Maybe you have them in your home. I have them written across the top of the Christmas stockings I hang in our house. But why these words? Why Christmas? In particular, the word peace. What's peace got to do with Christmas? Because I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, I can't wait for Christmas, it's just so peaceful. Because our modern Christmases certainly don't seem peaceful. There's the crowded shops, the financial stress, the impossibility of finding a car park, the drama of trying to figure out which family members go where and when, the exhaustion of young children getting up way too early and eating way too much sugar. What's peace got to do with Christmas? Well, maybe it's got something to do with the traditional Christmas, the birth of Jesus. Did you know Jesus was born during a period of history called the Pax Romana? That's a phrase that is used to describe about 200 years of peace that the Romans brought to the world. And Jesus was born during this time. In the Bible, in a book called Matthew, right at the start of Matthew in chapter 2, we read about Jesus being born when King Herod is ruling. King Herod was in charge of keeping the Roman peace in the area, the part of the world that Jesus lived in. So let's take a look at how this Roman peace impacted the world around Jesus. King Herod, we know about him not just because he's mentioned in the Bible, but from other historical sources. And he is actually known as King Herod the Great. And his kingdom really was impressive. King Herod was one of the greatest builders of all time. He built a harbour where it was impossible to build a harbour. And then he named it after his friend Caesar. It's called Caesarea Maritima, and you can go see the ruins today. King Herod had 10 palaces. He had a palace in Jerusalem where the Magi come and find him. But he had a summer and a winter palace. He had a palace by the sea and a palace in the desert. He had an escape palace. Now, of course, palace in a desert might be a little bit hard to live in, but Herod was able to overcome that. He had water piped through the desert to his palace. In Jerusalem, he undertook a building program that saw the temple improved. And he used stones so large, so magnificent to improve the temple that we would struggle today, even with all our modern equipment, to achieve the same thing. It's believed that Herod is one of the richest people ever to live. He funded the Olympic Games. But of course, this money has to come from somewhere. So if you're a ruler in the ancient world, where do you get your money from? From the people, through tax. And it's believed that the ordinary people may have paid up to 90%, that's 90% of their income and produce to Herod and the Romans through tax. In order for Herod to be great, he had to reduce the lives of the people around him to poverty. Now, of course, Herod also kept the peace. When Herod became king, this wasn't hugely popular with the Jewish people. He'd sort of become king because of the smooth political moves his dad had pulled before him. But the Jewish leaders got together and rebelled against Herod. So Herod fled back to Rome. But there he strengthened his support and returned to Jerusalem intent on being its king. So in 37 BC, Herod besieges Jerusalem with 11 battalions and 6,000 cavalry from the Romans. He kills his enemies. Some of them manage to escape to the mountains where they hide in caves. But Herod wants to keep the peace and will not rest until his enemies are destroyed. So he actually invents a new kind of technology that allows his soldiers to get up into the caves and smoke out his enemies. When they appear at the entrance of the cave struggling for breath, he has them flung to their death. Herod would kill 3 different high priests during his reign. One of them, it's believed, he drowned at his palace. This unfortunate man happened to be his brother-in-law. Herod married 10 women. He had 15 children. His favorite wife is Marianne. Now, it was a smart political move to marry Marianne because she was a Jewish princess, but he genuinely loved her. Unfortunately, he couldn't overcome his paranoia and he had her killed. Later, he brings the 2 sons he had to Marianne before him, and he forces them to argue over which son is the greatest. He has them both killed anyway. Now, the Romans turned a blind eye to all of this because what mattered was the Roman peace, and it was being kept. But the Romans had a saying, better to be Herod's dog than one of his children. In Herod's later life, he gets physically ill. He possibly gets an STD, and he becomes even more paranoid. He's worried that when he dies, no one will mourn. So he arranges for a large group of Jewish leaders to be brought together when he dies, so they can all be killed and the people will have something to mourn about. And it's into these later years in King Herod's life that the news of another Jewish king, a baby boy, is announced. Herod will do whatever it takes to keep his kingdom. So he has the baby boys in Bethlehem killed. We read in Matthew chapter 2, verse 18, that the mothers of these babies refuse to be comforted. There's no peace for them. They know that this Roman peace is no peace at all. So why do we talk about peace at Christmas? Because even the great Pax Romana doesn't bring the people peace. So maybe it's got something to do with Jesus himself. We read in Matthew chapter 2, verse 6, that Jesus will be the King of the Jews who is like a shepherd. Now, a shepherd loved his sheep. If you have pets or if you know somebody with a pet, you know what it's like to love your pet. If they get lost, you look for them. If they get sick, you take care of them. You love your fur babies. You take Christmas photos with them. A shepherd loved his sheep. If a sheep was lost, the shepherd would go and find it. At night, the shepherd slept across the gate to the sheep pen, not only to make sure that the sheep wouldn't wander out, but to stop anything coming in and harming the sheep. A shepherd loves the sheep and takes care of the sheep. So what does it look like for Jesus to be a king like a shepherd? Well, let's compare Jesus and Herod. You can measure Herod's greatness in land, in cities, in tax, in slaves. But Jesus said that his kingdom was not of this world. He didn't come and take any land. He didn't conquer any cities. Herod was one of the richest people ever to live. Jesus had no place to lay his head. Herod took many wives. Jesus didn't marry. For Jesus, family wasn't about domineering over women or creating an heir. He said, anyone can come into my kingdom and be part of my family. We can be brothers and sisters. In Jesus' family, there's equality between men and women, equality between people of different nationalities and education. Herod had his sons argue over who was the greatest. Jesus stopped his followers from arguing over who was the greatest. He told them that greatness in his kingdom is achieved by being a servant, by serving others. Herod would not stop until his enemies were killed. But Jesus loved his enemies. Jesus was handed over by the Jewish leaders to the Romans who had him crucified. And as he is hanging on that cross, he looks down at his enemies and says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Herod wanted his death to cause the death of others. Jesus wants his death to bring life to others. Herod is done. His kingdom is gone. But Jesus raised from death to life 3 days after he was crucified. Jesus said he has all power and authority, and that we should go and share this news to every nation. Jesus' kingdom is still growing as people learn the way of Jesus, the way of the shepherd king. Jesus is able to bring peace. Jesus is the one who is able to bring peace into our lives by showing us another way to live. A way where we don't count greatness, a way where we don't climb over others to get what we want, but a way where we serve others and lay down our lives for the benefit of others. And Jesus will one day return and bring the fullness of his kingdom. The whole earth will eventually be set right so that every person in his kingdom is able to have peace and safety, where women won't have to cry over the injustice brought on their children. That's why we celebrate peace at Christmas, because Jesus is able to bring peace for all people. And that is definitely worth celebrating at Christmas.